Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, holy shit, it has been forever since I said that. Let me mute the stream because now that's reverbing into my mic. Okay, so it has been a minute. Let's head to this live stream. Welcome back. You'll notice that I'm moving around in the chair and there's not sound. We had one massive upgrade since the little, what was it, 5-month hiatus? So a lot's been going on. I probably should have started streaming a little bit sooner because of the COVID-19 stuff that was there. But I have still been one of those lucky people that is still working right now. So because of my job and because of everything else that has been going on in my life, obviously not going to the gym, I look like a fucking whale right now and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'll hit that shit when we get back opened up as an economy, but I did have some time to sit down and put a mix together, and at some point in time Cloudbot's going to stream that through so you guys can get the download link and go directly to it. It's on the screen here. So a lot's happened since we last had a stream. Final Fantasy VII Remake came out, and honestly, I didn't avoid any of the spoilers because I really don't want to spend the money to buy a PS4 and then stream that direction. I'd rather just wait until it's on PC. Based on some of my friends that are playing it with some of the bugs and other things that came up while they were going through the playthrough, I do think that even if it takes a couple of extra months or even the year to get it to that point, I built a rig to handle something like Final Fantasy VII's Remake, and I want to enjoy it on my PC. So we're going to wait on that. However, in saying that, I do actually want to do a review of another streamer's review because there's only been one person I've watched play start to finish, and that's been Max. Now, the reason why I've been watching Max is because I think he's one of the most emphatic, outside of Suna and the rest of the guys that are friends of the channel here, he's probably one of the most emphatic fans of Final Fantasy VII that I've ever seen online. And with the small base that he has and the small group of people that follow him, he still puts everything he has into that game, games and JRPG genres, and he's just all about games in general. He's a very passionate dude. So I don't know how the sound is for you guys, Traps, Pudding, anybody else who's actually listening. If there's anything wrong, if you guys can barely hear the music in the background, I kind of want to keep that low. I'm still trying to readjust all of these different settings to make sure that I'm not catching a bunch of background noise or anything else like that. But we're going to switch off of this for right now. We'll come back to the SoundCloud, and we're going to bring Max's up. So for you guys that have not played the game yet, there's the link right there. See, it finally came up. That's the link for you guys to go download that. You're the only people outside of the World of Warcraft guild that I play with that have the availability to download that at this point in time. So if you'd like to pull that off before we do all of the me talking edits and all the crap like that, then you'll have the opportunity to do that with the raw, uncut, just the mix itself with just the music. I thought that'd be kind of nice since I haven't been on for so fucking long. But what I want to do here is Max did a really good review to Final Fantasy VII without spoilers. Now, I'm going to go into spoiler territory because I think that a lot of the guys that have been streaming kind of missed the mark, and it's either been a while since they played 7, or they maybe didn't get into it as deeply as myself or Suna or any of the other guys that have been modding the material, and I think that there's a really, really big point to this that they missed. But I do want to go over what Max is saying because I did watch almost his entire playthrough on normal mode, just so I can enjoy it too, because it's going to be a while, let's be real, before it comes out on PC. So I'm going to roll on this. I'm going to be pausing a couple of times in here just to give my thoughts on certain parts of what he's talking about and kind of combat it. His playthrough is the one that I watched all the way through. I did peek on Camper, and I did peek on a couple of other guys that I've seen actually play 7, but I 100%, and it's no offense to those guys, but like S-Fond and some of the other, I've completed myself and it looks really good. Yeah, it looks fantastic. Mind Tricks from our World of Warcraft guild has been playing it. He just can't stop going on and on and on about it. But a lot of the guys that were the big streamers that I watched the reactions that they had when it got to the ending and they didn't know who characters were, instantly just, nope. Sorry, dude. You don't care about the franchise. You did this just for numbers for your Twitch. You made the money decision. You don't care about the game. Max does, and it's very clear watching his playthrough that the guy's really passionate about it. So we're going to jump into his video. I'm probably going to have to adjust some of the volume. Oh my god. Let's level him out. If you guys aren't following Max on YouTube, please do.
I think Yeah, a spoiler-free review is in order. The first talk about it, just because I know a lot of people are going to be still through their playthroughs. This is a long game, and it's going to take. I mean, obviously, a lot of people are at home right now, and people have a lot of time. But for any average person that's going to have to go to work and come back home and play this a few hours a night, it's just going to take you a while. It's going to take you like a month to beat. So my quick spoiler-free review. There was a lot to expect from FF7 Remake, and the number one thing that everyone was kind of looking to and from was the demo, right? The demo was the thing that was sort of setting you up. That demo is actually extremely representative of the majority of the game.
I don't know that I agree with that point specifically, because after watching the playthrough, all the demo was getting you ready for was Final Fantasy 15 with 7 skins. I don't know that it elaborated on the story. I don't know if it answered the questions that those of us that have played through the game on stream, or we played through the game an insane amount. I don't know if it answered the important questions of how bad did you fuck up the story. But let's go on.
The nice part is that the things the demo does well, it does really well. Like extremely well in terms of like teaching the player and all these small things. Does it get any crazier than that throughout the whole game? It doesn't really. There's parts of Final Fantasy VII Remake that I think hit such high highs. They are so high, right? This game is the epitome of a roller coaster. I'm talking critically about it right now, right? This game is the epitome of a roller coaster. It is just bumps and turns and grinds and falls, and then there's moments where there's just not a lot happening, because a roller coaster has to rely on momentum, and that momentum can't keep itself that whole time, right? You're limited by force of gravity. So
let's take a second to appreciate the fact that throughout the Final Fantasy playthroughs that I've done, and I do plan on doing a new threat mod, because I do think that soon and those guys have some updates so we can go back through and play new threat here in the near future, since we're going to be wasting time until it comes out on PC anyway for me to do my full playthrough and then react to the game as fresh as possible with what they've gotten done, because I haven't actually played it myself, keep that in mind. But I do think that when they bring up the stuff about the dead space through the game, the serious Final Fantasy VII players that played it, we'll say more than 20 times at least, or guys that did speedruns, anybody who played the game a lot knows that you spent an insane amount of time between like Sector 5 and Sector 7, and then like any of the in-between areas, fighting Hell House, fighting all the rest of the areas that you could to try to grind, because we knew that the Shinra Tower was going to be the next grinding spot, but with a couple of the bosses we had early, we were still jumping on leveling materia. So in terms of what I saw and how they did the mechanic for the random encounters for this game, I think they were kind of filling that time. I don't think that there was a bunch of extra fluff in them. The side quests, the extra places you could go and fight mobs, that was a part of the real game. If you knew what was coming, you were spending, what do we do on stream? Probably, I would say 2.5 hours in Midgar, just grinding, just literally us drinking, BSing, and just grinding a little bit, because it was like, oh, we know what's coming up next. We want to level this materia. We'd like to go in with level 2. Or, Fire instead of Fire, or Cura. We were doing that on purpose. So I think they kind of filled that void pretty well by actually putting content in there that wasn't me running back and forth, running in circles, tilted back, kicking it, running around in circles, waiting for the next random encounter. So I feel like they still matched what would have been my style of gameplay for a 100% clearer perspective, at least.
a roller coaster is the perfect way I would describe this game, because not all of it perfect. Not all of it is exactly the epitome of game design and things like that. There are a lot of modern Square Enix video gamey aspects to this. But I can definitely say, from Square Enix long running, God, I'm actually trying to go back to think of last Square Enix game I thought was really good. And I think it's 15 Royale. I like 15 Royale, but I'd actually even rate 15 Royale less than this. But that game came with a huge brevity of issues and problems and all this stuff.
I'm going to be nice here because we're on stream. And at some point in time, since for a little while we were in the hiatus, when it came to Final Fantasy and it came to Square and Square Enix products, we had a majority of the viewership before Final Fantasy VII made Final Fantasy really popular on Twitch. But Square itself, Squaresoft, made insanely good games. Square Enix, on the other hand, unless you're a really big fan of Kingdom Hearts, I don't know how much else has actually been fantastic. 15, most people couldn't even play it because it was so bogged down and bugged. Even with the fixes and stuff, it was still killing frame rates. I don't know that Square Enix as a company has made something that's really spoken to me personally for 10 years, maybe 15 personally. So I think he's being nice there because he's the one that gets to go to the campuses and things. But this was a massive step up in relevance and actual fun gameplay. Maybe Yakuza, but like this was a massive step up for these guys as Square Enix to try to do what they did for this specifically and nail it as hard as they did, in my opinion.
We're talking about like direct Square Enix, right? Straight from their offices, not a game that's like Nier Automata, which is made by an outside company. And it's weird, it's like Final Fantasy 12, Final Fantasy 13, the spin-offs like that Final Fantasy 0 game. It's been a long time, and Shadowbringers I think was the last one that really sort of brought people home. A lot of people really like Shadowbringers in Final Fantasy 14, but when it comes to their single player game quests and their overall release of games, there's been some like people are upset, like, right? These games are obviously good quality, but there's issues. Like, I couldn't even bring myself to play more than 2 hours into Kingdom Hearts. Couldn't even bring myself to do it.
I personally enjoyed Kingdom Hearts, but like every other Final Fantasy head, I was waiting for how they were going to work Cloud and Sephiroth into the story. I do like Kingdom Hearts. That was a fun game at the time when it came out. I do think that the story was all over the fucking place, but I will give it credit. I did enjoy playing that game, so I won't take anything away from Kingdom Hearts specifically because that was filling a void that I didn't have with other games at the time.
I enjoyed FF15, but I waited. Like, I was like, this game, I'm gonna wait. It feels like they're gonna be fixing things and adding things. I'm gonna wait. I think I'm good. When it comes to like the Final Fantasy series in general, I think this is the first one in a very long time, in terms of like mainline and not like MMO stuff, that they kind of hit it out of the park.
Facts.
Right? Everything about this game is generally pretty damn good. It has, like I said, moments that are definitely lows where it's not amazing. It's like okay, this is fine. I guess this isn't great. But then it picks up, and the majority of the game, like the greater 75% of the game, is really high highs. Where the things that they actually needed Final Fantasy VII Remake to hit on, hit super hard. And the things this game hits super hard on. The thing this game really nails is
I fucking love this
music,
guy.
is characters. Dude, the combat, the visuals, outside of, you know, the weird texture thing. The storytelling, the story is a different thing. The way the story is told, I think is actually quite good in this game. In comparison to something like Final Fantasy 15, holy sh! Like in Final Fantasy 15, I'd actually say the story in FF15 is good, but the storytelling, mega negative buenos. No good. But in this game, I think the storytelling is good, but the overall story like has obviously some issues.
I don't agree at all, but I'll save it until after we get done with what Max has to say. I agree that 15 storytelling was absolute fucking garbage, but I don't agree that the storytelling for this one was bad. The story itself, obviously the storytelling and like the character development was just miles ahead of the original, in my opinion, because they actually gave you time to feel like you were supposed to be that person and care about these people, like it did by, I don't know, Disc 2. But I don't agree with that statement for a specific reason, and we'll touch on it afterwards.
Right, they have some issues, and we'll talk about that. But the things they really hit, the combat, the visuals, and the music, and the characters are fucking incredible.
100%.
They're incredible. And to me, for me personally, you can have a movie or a narrative that doesn't have a great story, but it has good characters. Good characters will carry and create stories in your head. And if you don't have a super captivating, and even like I think like the story in this game is still 95% of it is original Final Fantasy VII, right? It's just FF7. But the characters do so much. Oh my god, dude. See all Marvel movies, like, right? See every single Marvel movie. See any fucking Quentin Tarantino movie. Where like the story itself is okay, but it's carried by its characters. The characters, like, this game loves its characters so much. And like every little opportunity they have to put in references and nods and character building moments, they grab that shit and they make sure it's in here. Make sure it's in here.
They put in nods that were so good that I almost missed them while Max was doing his playthrough. And let's be clear, we've played Final Fantasy on the stream 3 times now. We played 7 3 times. And I've probably completed the game just over 45, maybe 50 times. Personally, it's my favorite game ever made. So I will tell you right now that he's spot on with that assessment. They did some nods that even I missed. Like, and I was like, wait a second, hold up. And I had to go back and think about it. So he's 100% spot on there.
Wasn't not enough of that? Make sure it gets in there. Make sure it's all in there. And that's one of the things I was really worried about. The number one thing I was worried about is this going to sound like Kingdom Hearts? Are the characters going to be sort of weird and cringy like they are in Final Fantasy 15? Even though FF15 has good characters, it takes time. It takes time for that game to get good characters, but it happens. Is it going to suffer those issues that a lot of these giant big production Square Enix games have had for the past decade, it feels like? Are we going to be going through this shit again? And it's not. It's actually refreshingly good, ridiculously good, better than I thought it ever could be. The scenarios they put the characters in, the conversations they have with each other, the way everything happens for, like I said, 95% of the game is incredibly good. And there's like obviously one portion where things are like, whoa, what's going on? And things take like a big left turn. But dude, for the majority of the game, I love the characters in this game. Like, so much of their dialogue and so much of it is exactly what I wanted. Like, as an FF7 fan, I don't even much want to see the characters fight. I want to see the characters talk to each other and have meaningful conversations. I want to see characters develop. I want to see characters change.
Bring polygons alive.
There's a lot of that in this game. There's a whole bunch of that. Like,
bring the polygons to life. I feel like that was the point that Square wanted to do, and if that was the goal for this, they fucking nailed it. Like, they nailed it so hard. And the fact that Cloud wasn't insanely emo, and like it wasn't just a carbon copy like Final Fantasy VIII's main protagonist, who was actually emo, was actually an adolescent child, and then Cloud being a hardened mercenary that had been through some shit, they actually gave Cloud more of Cloud's identity and gave him less of what they just kind of tried to wash together and make him and Squall kind of be the same, I don't know, like whiny, not a part of it, doesn't care kind of shit that was there, which really bugged me through the playthroughs when we played 7 and 8 back to back, because it was like, wow, these guys are like really, well, I don't care, flip the hair or spin the sword. But in Remake, it wasn't like that. Cloud was actually pretty fucking hard. I appreciated that. And Kingdom Hearts, they made him emo in that. Yeah, and I never thought that actually fit Cloud. Maybe a little lost, but like, dude was already been through some shit. He should have been harder than that, in my opinion. And they nailed that for this.
Every single character you see in this image right here, right, except for one, every single character you see in this image goes through a transformation of some kind. They go through some realizations, some changes, and they have proper character growth, just like the way they kind of do in the original Final Fantasy VII. And that was one of the things I was easily the most worried about. I mean, outside of the music, and I can't even, what do I even have to say about the music? Right? If there's anything in this game that is obviously fucking amazing, is the music. The music is incredible. I don't even know if there's any contention in that situation. The way the music is utilized in this game is probably the best of any Square Enix game I've ever seen. The way the music sets up for moments, the amount of different tracks, the amount of tracks that shift from one element to another, as the game's behind the scenes was describing, like a DJ composing the elements of every single track. Mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing that they're able to surpass the music of the original Final Fantasy VII.
Facts.
And I love the original FF7 music. I'd argue that one of the biggest emotional ties that I have to FF7 is actually its music. Because the music in that game is incredible. It is absolutely incredible. So the fact that they were able to create resonating, emotional, heartfelt, and fun music throughout this entire game, the whole fucking game, probably gonna go down as one of the greatest soundtracks ever. And then last but not least, of course, besides things like characters and music, combat. And I think I have read a lot of impressions, and the combat in this game isn't perfect. It's not perfect. Like many elements of the original Final Fantasy VII, FF7 is my favorite game of all time, but there are things I don't find perfect in that game. Absolutely. I think it's kind of weird after a very tragic event happens, everyone jumps on snowboards and woohoo! You know, there's some very weird pacing issues in the original FF7.
I don't think that that's the weirdest, but it's a good example. I could bring up like 3 or 4 other ones that were kind of like, okay, Costa del Sol rings a bell, but let's go on.
Things like the combat, while they aren't perfect, what they managed to nail, the parts that are good about it, they do so well, right? The combat is done so well. And the coolest part,
For those of you guys that have played it, because I haven't actually put my hands to the controller and played it, what do you think about the combat system? Traps, you said you've got it. Did you guys enjoy like the multi-dimensions that they had that kind of still incorporated the ATB? Would you have preferred that it just went back to like the turn-based style so it felt more Final Fantasy? What did you think about the combat? Because it's kind of a mixed thing with my buddies. Like guys over here are like, yeah, the combat system's smooth, it feels great, it's got the action aspect to it. And then other people, and we're gonna call them purists just for lack of a better way to put it, we're still like, man, they should have just left it turn-based. So what did you think about it? Or anybody else has played it. Fuck, there's 24 of you guys in here. I'm gonna guess that some of you guys actually played the game if you stopped in to check this out. I enjoyed the ATB system, and I'm glad they kept the materia system and upgraded the weapons. That's a whole nother ball. Like, I was very impressed that they kept the same materia system, but they like evolved it to fit the current gameplay. And then the weapon upgrade shit was just fantastic. Like, that was a great idea, and that's something that I feel like they carried over with like the new generation of Enix games, and then like the Devil May Cry system where you're just adding attachments to a weapon that you personally like kind of shit. I feel like that was a awesome system. Watching it, it looks so fun to try to find the fluid combo that works and go from casting Braver to right into Dolphin Kick and then have Barrett cast Catastrophe. Any of the stuff that was there, it just looked so clean. It looked very fun to play with.
part is that outside of side quests, and side quests have some relatively like normal enemies, sometimes larger enemies, sometimes stuff like that. The boss fights, the larger fights, and the eventual scalability of those fights that happen throughout the game is amazing. Absolutely amazing. The biggest issue is obviously the camera. Obviously, air combat is just not fun. Luckily, air combat composes maybe 1/50th of the amount of combat in the game. So that would definitely need to be fixed, but it was like, if there's a flying enemy, it's obviously more annoying than it is kind of fun. And then, you know, the rest of the game, which is 49 out of 50 times, which is ground combat, is super good. It's very fun. Very action gamey, which I like about it. It's about timing, it's about movement, mitigating damage, keeping characters alive, and balancing, and have a crazy balancing act. And there's some bosses that exemplify the shit out of that, and some ones that I haven't even seen yet. It makes you feel like everyone's a team, right? You truly feel like everyone is working together, backing each other up. It doesn't feel like you are playing like an MMO light, like a Final Fantasy 12 sort of thing. Like Final Fantasy 12 is largely very similar in how its combat is sort of addressed in this game. But in that game, they know that you as the player can't control every character, so they have the Gambit system, right? It's like an evolution of that. And that game's essentially Final Fantasy XI's combat, but offline for the most part. And this one, like, everything feels so good. It just feels, every character just manages to be so much fun. It's ridiculous. Like, if you tell me like a character that I like playing the most between Aerith, Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett, I couldn't even tell you which one I like the most, because all of them they're so much fun. I can only imagine how much crazier it's going to get when future characters are introduced in future games. It really is the one thing, though. If there was one thing they had to nail in this game, even outside of like characters and music, which is the stuff I think they just knocked it out of the park, it's combat, and they did it. This game is super fun to play. It's incredibly fun. Even simple combat is enjoyable, but it really is exemplified in boss fights. And luckily, there's a shit ton of boss fights in this game. There is very few boss fights in FF7 Original Midgar, and they take bosses and characters that normally wouldn't be boss fights, and they make them big, giant spectacles.
That is something that I actually appreciate that they did, because one thing, like I said earlier, a lot of early game Midgar, that's why I kind of don't like the fact that they named this one Remake. I feel like you could have named it like Midgar or something to that nature, because a lot of early game Final Fantasy VII, there wasn't a lot of bosses. It was just running back and forth or running in circles trying to get boss fights to level yourself up for the few fights that you had. In this situation, it seems like they had enough bosses that they could supplant the amount of experience that you would have gotten by grinding through the slums, grinding through the ghost grave or the ghost train yard, and grinding through any of the other locations that you had good bosses to fight. they put in boss fights that just looked fantastic. Like the size, the spectrum that you had, like how hard they were. That just seemed like it was really well done to keep the pacing up for the entirety of the game. Because a lot of Midgar was boring as fuck. Like, let's be real. Like, as someone who's played a lot of it, I love it too. The bosses feel like bosses, and eventually the normal weak monsters at a certain point get weak. Yeah, but again, like I said, the play mode plus. So like those bosses that were weak, I did notice that through the game it seemed like Max was one and two shotting some of the different encounters that they had. He was also, a lot of what he was doing was very simple, but if you have a hard mode, you go back in, if they're, I haven't seen the hard mode playthrough for it just yet, but if they add more adds and they're adding, let's just say attack and HP to them, and it extends that fight, the combat itself out more for those instances for better rewards because it's, you know, a plus mode for hard mode, that's got to be fantastic. Let's go on with what Max is saying though too, because I think he's going to get there.
Huge, crazy, epic events, and they always feel fun. They feel thorough, and the materia system is essentially the same materia system that you remember from 1997. It's the same thing. I'm really happy that they had the design philosophy to not take away the things that made the original Final Fantasy VII fun. Most of the things that made the original combat so good are all here. And you feel that all the way until the final battles of the game, which is genuinely fun. The only downside with it is that a lot of the smaller battles that are sprinkled throughout and in between a lot of the stuff, the grindy battles, as you would say, that compose a lot of FF7 original, some of those fights aren't amazing. They're not. They're clearly not the best stuff in the world. You whacking around rats and whacking around bugs and, you know, weird hedgehogs and stuff like that. And they sometimes provide a challenge and they sometimes don't. I think there's literally a balance to be made for the future game, and that's an upgrade, right? That's an upgrade that I think they definitely can make. Fix air combat, fix the issues with smaller fights. Some of the smaller fights are a little weird. I'm really curious about hard mode, right? I want to see what hard mode is gonna bring to the combat.
Exactly.
Because I was upset that half the game, the regular enemies were dying so fast, right? That's like, right, that's the thing. It's the nature of trash mobs, right? It's just the nature of that stuff. It's like the same thing happens in the original Final Fantasy VII, right? With you fighting Shinra soldiers and everything. So many things in this game are like the original FF7, almost to a negative in many ways. I started thinking in this game, and I'm gonna get into some of my issues now. There's a lot of just walking around and just observing. There's a lot of just walking around and listening to characters talk. There's a lot of just moving from one place to the other, with very limited interactivity. For so much else of the game to raise the design principles that video games have changed over the past 23 years between like its music, the characters, the story between the characters is actually all really good, and then the combat is all fucking fantastic. The weird thing is that the level design is not amazing, and there's very few levels that I would find this is super fun. The majority of levels are completely like bare bones average to not great, and they're completely carried by captivating character dialogue, interesting characters, the continuation of the story, as well as really fun combat and great music.
Okay, so again, like I know what Max is getting at, where it's like, okay, it's been 23 years and we're still running into areas where it feels like we're pandering, we're running back and forth. But I can think of, just off the top of my head, fuck, I was one of those idiots that was looking for random encounters during the bomb getting ready to explode at the first reactor we blew up. Because I was like, okay, I can get potions here. I can stock up on extra experience before we get to the next level, because it's not going to be a lot of fights until we make the transition back to 7th Heaven. And the second time back to Midgar, dude, I can't tell you how many times it was up and down steps. Just hour and a half, easy. Just running back up and down scaffolding. That was the part of it. What I noticed about the playthrough was that they were making the backdrops nice. They made them look functional. They made things happen to bridges. They made things happen to, you know, crane arms and things like that. But it's about the dialogue. They're giving us the opportunity to let those polygons talk. So it's same setting, but now we're adding more emotion, more character interaction, more time to chat, and it gave Square the opportunity to build more on the story, because we're already familiar. I mean, fuck, the garden outside of Eris' parents' place was the exact same layout. Spot on, exact same. I'm not saying that Midgar was spot on the exact same, because there were some subtle changes, and obviously with the graphic updates and the upgrades that they had to the engine, they looked and felt different. But at that point, I was literally like, okay, it still felt like a new place. And when I looked at the map, I'm like, God damn, that's almost spot on exactly what we did playing through the game. They nailed that part so fucking hard. It was insane. So I understand where he's coming from, where it could have, I get the point from A to B is a lot better and the whole world is a lot bigger. They've expanded on the world and characters tenfold. Absolutely. I still felt like even going through some of the areas, I felt weird deja vu watching those areas because I was like, oh yeah. I remember like when we had to go up and crawl through the vents and we had to get to the other side, and the whole time I was like, why didn't we just go around? I always thought about that from the first one, but it was part of that game. So that probably made the purists a lot more happy. And then Max, who's being critical about this and not being the super fan that he is just pointing out that it feels like there's gaps in there, which he's right. But there were gaps in the original too. Like those were grind times for us. That was time to strap in, grab a drink, get comfy, and just start moving the diagonal pad or moving the flipper. Just like, okay, we're gonna get a fight right over here. We're gonna sit here for 45 minutes to an hour. We're gonna make sure we're getting the experience. So I get it, but I personally thought it was awesome.
Those things weren't there. My God, dude, the level design aspect in this game would be, it's like the exact same thing that people had issues with in Devil May Cry 5. It's very similar. The level design in these big Japanese like action titles isn't great, but that seems to be negated because the things that really matter is the combat, right? The combat is so good. The fighting feels so much fun with every character. I've had genuine like video game like, oh my God, what is happening type moments while I was in combat. And it wasn't a cutscene that was doing that shit to me. It was the gameplay. The game itself is just mind-blowingly fucking cool. Like I can't even believe what I'm playing right now. And that's awesome. That feeling is amazing. I just really wish, right, that it had some fun, really fun dungeons, but it doesn't. And if you go back and think about it, that linearity, that feeling is very similar to the original Final Fantasy VII. I feel like so many things they were afraid to go too far, and like the level design is one thing. We don't want our players to be intimidated by the level design because we have an intimidating battle system. We don't want our players to have to worry about missing things. They make the level design so similar to the original FF7, where it is like painfully linear in the original game. I think they go a little bit too hard there. So much to the point where I'm only hoping that that was a design decision to make that very linear and to make it less interactive in this game so that the next game can be the exact opposite, can be the big open world. Whoa, there's so much shit to do. I can only hope that the future of this is a much more expanded and even better Final Fantasy 15. My biggest worry for a lot of Final Fantasy VII Remake was that these issues were going to make the first game not good. Worst case scenario, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 comes out. It's like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. Critically, this game is like getting like high 80s and then like low 90s from the majority of review outlets, right?
Like
it's performed
middle 90s.
very well critically. And I was worried it was going to be kind of the low end, right? Kind of going to be like, well, the combat's fun, but man, like so many other things are just terrible, right? The characters are weird and stilted. The story goes in insane different directions. Characters are doing things that don't make any fucking sense in comparison to the previous game. That's really not the case. Like I said, the greater 95% of Final Fantasy VII Remake, the characters are doing what they do from the previous game. They're doing exactly what they do. They're communicating to each other and they're voiced by actors and actresses that nail these roles, just kill these roles so well. So damn well. But at the same time, there's clearly some pretty big deviations. And the biggest deviation is clearly at the end of the game that a lot of people have discussed. And I would say for myself, the new stuff that they introduced into the game, I actually liked the bonus missions. I liked taking characters in between places and getting more backstory. But there was clearly a couple of missions, one involves sewers, that we could have done without, right? This didn't really add much. There's bonus character stuff. But like I said, the majority of those characters are freaking great. Like the majority of those missions are still super fun because the characters and the combat and the music make them fun. I'd say that represents a very large majority of the game, like 75 to 80% of the game is that. And it's just a blast. It's, dude, like characters don't come back and I'm like, where'd they go? That character was crazy. Where'd they go? Like I really enjoyed a lot of the new stuff that they put in here and the expansion of already existing characters. Don Corneo is an exemplary example. The Honeybee Inn with Andrea is all exemplary examples that make everything so much better. These are the ways that they expanded the game in ways that you were not expecting. And they did it. And it's fucking great. It's so good.
Facts.
Yes, there is a big story deviation, and I think the lead up to that story deviation is abrupt because you learn very little about it, and there's not a lot of talk about it. It seems that the game is really focused on, obviously, the narrative of the original Final Fantasy VII, and then there's a big story deviation where we eventually pick up and essentially go in the same route, right? There's a big moment that it's like, what? What is going on here? Spoilers aside, because we'll save that for the spoiler aspect. I was definitely confused. I was definitely wondering which direction they were going to go. It takes some thought, right? This ending is not a gut reaction sort of like, oh, like sort of thing. It takes some investment to sort of figure out what you think about it. I think that's super bold. So, like I said, the game is not perfect. Like FF7 Remake clearly could have had better levels, clearly could have had more interactivity. But for what this game is, and I've described this a few times and I'll describe it again, this is Yakuza FF7. They took essentially the gameplay structure of a Yakuza game, and they're like, let's do that with Final Fantasy VII. Just as much compelling characters and dialogue and well-acted cutscenes. Let's just make it Yakuza. And then we'll also sprinkle in music, right? We'll just make the music incredibly emotional. We'll make the story beats that happen throughout this game hit so hard. Like, my God, dude, like, I can't even tell you how many times this game just emotionally wrecked me. As an FF7 fan, wrecked me. I think the path of the Yakuza path for Midgar, I think that was smart. I actually can't think of many things I would really change in this outside of one obvious, like, big thing. I think the majority of the game, yeah, that's how I would have done in Final Fantasy VII Remake. That really is. That's how I would have treated these characters. That's how I would have gotten them eventually to Midgar, where they're going to be confronted with the open world. Introduce as many mini games, as much tiny things, as many characters that can possibly talk. Oh, and I gotta say, as much as you maybe can't interact with characters in this game, the amount of world building and dialogue that is in NPCs is astounding. Astounding. Like, the fact that so many characters have so much different stuff to say. They have like 2 or 3 different things to say per character, but they also change what they say as story events happen. That's crazy to me. Like, you could spend so much time just figuring out the world building of this game by just walking around town and listening to NPCs talk to each other. There's just so much. And a lot of it's pretty good. A lot of it's pretty sad, too. The world feels really alive and lived in.
They also played, I'm going to point that out because I noticed that a lot, too. You actually got a feel for not knowing if Avalanche was the good guy. And if you guys that have played 7 a lot remember, like, there was a stationary path until you hit, like, the trains with the Shinra employees. And then you kind of like, well, you're the bad guy. But in the back of your head, you're like, well, you're fucking Shinra. Like, I don't give a fuck what you think, right? But when you talk to, like, the people that were in some of the sectors that were affected by what was going on, like, hearing the chaos and hearing how, like, torn they were because they were losing their homes or they lost everything because of what was going on, like, it really made you think, man, am I the good guy or the bad guy? I think it was on purpose. I think that was a design decision that they made. But, like, for a little while there, when Max was walking through some of the areas and just trying to, like, oh man, look at how good it looks, when I was listening to what the NPCs were saying, I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Like, this guilt complex that they're instilling is just making the emotions change so much. Like, am I doing this right? Am I the good guy or the bad guy? And then, of course, you know, as the story plays out, Shinra shows, hey, by the way, we're king asshole here. You guys are fine. But they still did a really good job, like, making that kind of a moral crossroads throughout the entirety of the first part of the walking through Midgar and getting affiliated with it. And then when sections happened, he's 100% right. Like, they changed the narrative of all of these NPCs to really just suck you into Midgar as a world and make you feel like you're actually there. So that part, they honestly did nail. I was super, super happy to see and hear what I did while he was running through his playthrough.
And I think that's clearly one of the things that, as an FF7 fan, that I was worried about that they wouldn't hit. That it was going to feel like I was kind of playing Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy 13 again. For a lot of their games, it feels like I'm just running around these environments. It doesn't feel like there's much going on beyond them. And a lot of these Final Fantasy style games and Square Enix games, it doesn't feel like there's much going on beyond what I'm just running down this hallway to do. While this game doesn't give you that interactivity, it does give you enough backstory and character involvement and realistic, truly human characters to pull you forward. And I think that's really good. I think it's clearly one of the best Square Enix like directly internal games of the Final Fantasy like franchise. And I know the next game is going to be a lot different, right? Next game is not going to be the same very linear sort of Yakuza style game. I think they'll still have those big cinematic set pieces, but I don't think it's going to represent the whole game, which is essentially what this is. Like, the thing I wanted the most was that me running in between set pieces, I just wanted more shit to do. And that's my biggest gripe, is that this game, I wish it gave me more stuff to do, even in my first playthrough. For me personally, and critically, I'd say, my critical review of Final Fantasy VII Remake is a 9 out of 10. A game that clearly has issues. A game that clearly is not the epitome of modern level design, like a Souls game, or the absolute best combat ever, because it also has issues. But the things that it hits on, which is elements of the combat, which is the characters. The characters, man. I can't even stress that Final Fantasy VII characters have never been this good before.
Fact.
They just haven't. Advent Children, Crisis Core, Dirge of Cerberus. These games have like good stories, but they have terrible characters, and they have terrible storytelling for the most part. Like Crisis Core, Zack aside. And that's the rough part, man, is that a lot of the stuff that's surrounding Final Fantasy VII outside of the original, which is pretty much left to your interpretation, characters suck, dude. They are not good. And I know because I recently played all of it, right? I recently played FF7 again, played Crisis Core and Dirge. It's a rough experience, especially if you're looking for, I just like to see Vincent do stuff, and yeah, and I want to see him talk to people. Like,
yeah, that game was, if you were looking for an experience for Vincent and not just there for, like, I don't know, a playable book, you weren't nailing it. It was pretty bad.
ooh, ooh, ooh. This game does no issue there, right? And if the same people are going to be taking these characters through whatever the fuck adventure they're going to be going through, regardless of how similar to the OG Final Fantasy VII that is, regardless of how different to the original FF7 it could potentially be, I personally am kind of okay with that. As long as the characters are this way, as long as they sound and they act the same, as long as the new people and the new characters that they come across are represented just as well. If that's the case, then, you know, even FF7's story clearly isn't perfect and it's super convoluted. But if you have good characters taking you through that story, when things happen to them, you give a shit. And that's what makes the fights better. That's what makes the music better. And that's what overall makes the game better.
That emotional attachment to those characters, I do feel like Square destroyed that facet of this game. Because even if you weren't a classic player and you haven't played every game in the series and you don't hold 7 above everybody else, you really started to care what happened to Aerith. You really started to care about what happened to Tifa. You could feel the charisma and the passion that Barrett had in the original that we were just reading. And then, like, they played that out perfectly. Like, the character development and the way they were getting things done was just so unbelievably good. It would have made anybody who's never even played the series actually give a shit. And it's been a very long time for somebody that falls back and then plays WoW because I enjoy the teamwork and I enjoy the people that I play the game with. It's been a very, very long time.
He's lying, he hates us.
Has made, like, people care that much about the individual characters. So Max is 1,000% right on that. They did a fantastic job and knocked that one straight out of the park.
Point of it being,
I do hate my WoW guild.
Role-playing game, that you're taking the role, and the characters that are with that role with you need to.
I did, however,
like
get to play
real,
that game on my buddy's PS4, and I'm really sad that I don't have a PlayStation.
Big facts.
Actually do combat stuff again, but I want to go through and I just want to hear characters talk to each other again. 9 out of 10. But in terms of a personal review, I definitely give it a 10 out of 10. For me personally, the game clearly has issues. The lows aren't low enough to make me hate any aspect of this game. The lows aren't low enough. The highs are so astronomically high, right? Between, like, me having to remind myself that, oh, I'm just sort of running, you know, and looking at stuff, looking for things to be interactive, and they're not. But then I'm reminded by an extremely good character scene with extremely good music, and then we're presented with a very unique, like, battle situation that has great characters in it, or a boss fight that is just astronomical. So many of these boss fights are just incredible. The way those hit with me is a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10. I think it shares just as many issues as the original Final Fantasy VII has, which is funny. A lot of the issues that I have with the original FF7, some very clear similarities of that game as well. Right, some very clear similarities that make that my favorite game of all time, and I can acknowledge that there's clearly not some good shit in that game. Dude. For me personally, 10 out of 10. From a critical review-wise, 9 out of 10. I loved every minute. I was astounded, and I loved every single minute. I'm just thinking about it, I just want to play it again. I just want to play it again. Thank God there's a New Game Plus. Holy shit. I should almost give the game an entire point based on that. There's a New Game Plus. Holy fuck. I can't, that makes me very happy. That makes me very happy that we're going to give you an entire reason to keep playing through and keep doing stuff, right? Oh, I can't wait. Can't wait.
So, without going into too much spoiler territory, I have to agree with Max. I think that they did such a fantastic job, just an unbelievable job of recapturing the things that I was looking for in the game itself. And I have to say that the things... Oh, hey. Please chill out. The things that were what everybody was kind of complaining about, I didn't have as much complaints because I felt like, okay, let's compare this to the original. So I kept bouncing it back off of, okay, if that was me playing New Threat, or that was me playing... It's gonna get loud again. 1 freaking second. I found you last time. I will find you this time too. Yes, I did. So let's just get this loaded up now. Which one's further? The Jose Temple bottom. Load this file. Now let me turn this down so I can give you guys my thoughts on that. System settings, audio. Let's turn this all the way down. So, in terms of the boss fights and in terms of the other things that they added to the game, I don't think that there was any better representation of a 23-year-old game to now. There are obviously some things that they could have done a little better, but trying to make something seem like it wasn't an absolute accomplishment and like just gorgeous and above any bar that we have set for gaming right now, would be lying, because there's no other game that felt like how I felt watching that playthrough. And yeah, that's from a super fan perspective, and yeah, that's something that I played on the channel, and you guys can tell. Like, I'm pretty sure I almost cried when Aerith died the last playthrough we did because I was drunk and it hit me in the feels. Like, clearly we are very, very invested in the game as a group of people that played it as much as we did. But like, I'm trying to see myself as coming in from an outside perspective and just playing a good video game, getting to know the characters, and outside of the ending, which I really want to go through, but I feel like there's another video that would better represent that. I might do that tonight. If you guys can't tell, I'm trying to get the reactions to where I can cut them off and put them on YouTube, so then I can have my reactions there in stone. People can look them up, and I can have people find my way to look at it. But just on the non-spoiler perspective, right? The things that they did for the game, I think Square was kind of trolling a little bit. I think that they made a fantastic game. They introduced the characters that they needed to. The battle system looks fun. The materia system was very clear to the original. The summons and the fact that there was some DLC that we could get some summons, that's going to happen. Like, they're selling to a market that is going to microtransaction the absolute dick off this game. So I knew some of that was going to be there. There's probably going to be, like, the Advent Children, you know, outliers and dresses for stuff. I saw that there's multiple dresses for Tifa and for Aerith as well. Like, it's gonna happen. I get that. I don't think that takes anything away from me personally as a player of the game. But I will say that on the non-spoiler perspective, that I was on the edge of my seat. I hate watching other streamers that aren't like Suna doing actual work on modding, or Camper trying to do a speed run, or guys that I know really care about the games. I really can't stand that. But Max's playthrough, seeing somebody else that cares about the game just as much as I do, seeing him that excited and just get emotional, bro. Like, there were a couple of spots where it's like, he's crying, he's plucking, like, he's gone, it's out of there. I felt that same on the other side of the screen. So in terms of what I think about the game, I'm gonna have to agree with at least a 9.5 out of 10 from a review point, just from what I've watched for the playthrough, and that's without even touching the game, because I'm gonna be that douchebag that waits to see if it either hits stream or if they just do a PC release standalone. But some of the things that he was talking about, like if you compare it to the original, if you sit down and you compare it to the brass tacks, if it's no worse than 7 and it is an upgrade, especially to like where we are with the times and the current technology that we have for this kind of thing, that's fucking awesome. The story deviations he's talking about, I want to go in depth with that after a few more drinks, because I don't know if you guys have ever seen me stream sober, but I wanted to go through that after a couple of drinks because I think I know exactly what Square is doing. And I watched a bunch of these other Eurogamer and Game Informer and all these other guys reacting to the ending and trying to explain it. And honestly, I'll be real clear with you. When I watched the ending the first time, I instantly felt like I knew exactly what Square was doing. And I'm also going to say that I'm not mad. I think that there are characters that people didn't get to have in this light, in the talking to each other, character development, fully actually getting into character and explaining that. And I'm fine with that. And if they want to change timelines, or I have a different theory on it, and I'm going to explain that a little bit later. So I hate to kind of cut people off, but I want to make sure that there is a spoiler-free version of this and then also a serious spoilers version, because I'm going to dive deep into what I think I've seen used before in Square games with the Arbiters of Fate, because they did kind of use those in Kingdom Hearts, not to the same capacity, but they did kind of use those in Kingdom Hearts, and I think people need to not blame, what is it, Nobomura or whatever his name is from Kingdom Hearts team. You can't blame that element, because in the same light that we're looking at now, for them to just do the same old game, this is not a remaster. This is not an HD upgrade. They're not upgrading fucking polygons. That's a pipe dream. This is a game that they admitted in the 90s that they got the story out that they kind of wanted to, but there was so much else that they wanted to tell, but they were restricted by the technology. They were restricted by the money, because at that point in time, dumping the amount of money that they have into games like they do now would have been a fucking joke. Like, they would have still been paying that shit off. Also wanted to ask if I can join voice chat. Oh, absolutely. I'm going to take a short break here so I can finish this and make another drink and smoke. Because like I said, I want to cut this off so it's in sections so I can put it on YouTube. But when we get to that part, Traps, if you have to go earlier, I can have you come in and we can discuss that, because I have another video specifically that really pissed me off that I want to play to go through that. So probably about the halfway segment for tonight, within the next, I don't know, probably 2 hours. We'll get 2 hours of 10 in since we're through Jose. And then we'll jump back into that so I can discuss it. But there's some stuff that I'm just going to point out that I feel like I know exactly what Square is doing. I'm not mad about it. I feel like it is kind of a reused mechanic, but it's giving them creative freedom. And I think that the whole reason we're seeing these things and the whole reason they did it this way is because they're literally just mocking purists. Like, this is our baby. There's a story that we didn't get to tell all the way we wanted to tell it. And now we're going to get to explore different ways that would have come about and explore more character depth through a different lens. And I think that it's a gorgeous idea. It makes me excited, because that means that if the next game, because let's be real, we all know how the next game goes. You go straight to Calm, and then you end up going to the Chocobo farm, getting your Chocobo, crossing. You can either fight the Midgar Zulum or not, get into the caves, you're coming out, then you're running into where you have the options to go to Fort Condor the first time, or let's say have that out of order, because then eventually you have to get to Cosmo Canyon because the story arc happens with Red. Then you have the heading over to Junon, it leads you over to Junon, then it's out to Costa del Sol. I don't think Square's gonna keep the precision of linearity that was in the first game, but I think they're gonna keep some of this linear stuff because they feel like they can tell the story better that way. The part about 7 that I liked the most was that you kind of had a way that you could tell your own story after a certain part of the game. And I'm not just talking about Disc 3, where it was just open world, run around, do whatever you want to, but you could kind of side quest a little bit. You could go play in the forest and go find a certain little spoiled ninja that stole all your shit. Like, there was a lot of things that you could do that, even if they keep it linear just to tell the story and keep the game the way it is now, as long as they're not taking too much out of it and they're just giving their spin on things, I think it's going to be fantastic. So this is the part here where I'm going to take a short break. Like I said, I want to make another drink. Where in the hell did SoundCloud go? I'm going to bring the mix back up. I'm going to go mix a drink really quick. And with that, guys, I will be right back.